Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Professor Jennifer Harder at McGeorge School of Law. I'm pleased to welcome you to our webinar, Leadership for COVID and Beyond, the Legal and Lobbying Skills You'll Need. I'm here today with our admissions counselor, Kitanya Worsham, and one of our excellent faculty members in the online program, Professor Chris Micheli. Professor Micheli is an alumnus of our school, and he teaches a course that focuses on statutory drafting and interpretation called Legislatures and Lawmaking, as well as a course on lobbying and politics. Professor Micheli is the founder of Apria and Micheli, which is a government relation firm in Sacramento. He has substantial legislative and regulatory experience in the area of state and local tax, transportation, civil liability, insurance, privacy, employment, healthcare, and procurement. So very well-rounded there. So we're here today to talk about the benefits of legal training in McGeorge's Master of Science in Law program, what we sometimes call our MSL program. And we'll take a look at the lobbying field in the time of COVID pandemic. Now we're going to focus on Professor Micheli's courses, which along with our other slate of courses provide an excellent framework for students and professionals who are interested in facilitating change around major issues of the day, such as public health care. So I welcome Professor Micheli and Kitanya. To start us off, I just want to give a brief overview of McGeorge's Master's in Government Law and Policy degree. This is a fully online graduate degree for people who are interested in a deep dive in government law and policy, but who do not need a Juris Doctor, a JD degree, to achieve their goals. So if you want to take the bar exam and represent clients, you want a JD degree. This is different. Our program is part-time. It's tailor-made for students and professionals who want to further their education and advance their career, but who do not live in the Sacramento area or who need flexibility due to work, professional, or other obligations. Separate from the Master's in Government Law and Policy program, McGeorge also offers a Master's in Water and Environmental Law. So our Government Law and Policy degree was inspired by McGeorge's Center for Distinction, the Capital Center for Law and Policy, and our nationally ranked program in Public and Government Law. I encourage you to check out the Capital Center through the CAP Impact blog to learn more. Professor Micheli is a frequent contributor to the CAP Impact blog. So let's turn to Professor Micheli now. Professor Micheli, can you talk to us about your courses in Legislatures and Lawmaking and in Lobbying and Politics? Tell us a little bit about what each course covers and what students can hope to learn in the courses.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Professor Harder. I'm very excited to be a part of the MSL program at McGeorge, and the degree in government law and policy, I think, is a fantastic opportunity, not just for folks who might be interested in working in and around local, state, or federal government, or even in lobbying and politics, but today, the role of government, the legislature, impacts whether you're in the public sector or the private sector. At any level of government plays a role. And so I think that the background that students get in some of these courses as part of their Master's in Government Law and Policy will help them no matter what career path you might choose. Specific to the legislatures and lawmaking, it's about the legislative branch of government at both the state and federal levels. A fellow professor, Jessica Gosney, who works as a deputy legislative counsel. These are the attorneys who work for the California legislature to not only provide them legal advice, but more importantly, for this purpose, they're the ones who draft bills. And what Professor Gosney and I put together, we drafted this course essentially from scratch, if you will, is we expose students to the two legislative branches of government at both the federal and state levels. And we talk about the distinct processes that are used to develop statutes, the laws that govern our day-to-day conduct. And so once that introduction is made, then we get into a discussion about how to learn to read those statutes and interpret them, and also how the courts do so. The semester-long course culminates with our students actually drafting a bill. We don't just throw it at you. Several weeks we spend on it and drafting little pieces of a bill, but you can see the very practical experience that students get to not only academically talk about the lawmaking process, but actually have students participate in it by drafting a bill themselves. So that's sort of an outline of the Legislatures and Lawmaking course. Again, it's an effort to expose students to a lot of judges like to talk about California being a statutory state as opposed to a common law state, and that may make sense to JD students or lawyers, but the idea is that we developed our laws based upon court decisions or common law. But many states like California have enacted so many statutes over the years that much of our activities are regulated or authorized or prohibited even by statutes. And so again, whether you're in or out of state government or local government or federal government, or you're just working for a business or in the public sector, understanding how those laws are made is very helpful, because statutes are such a significant part of the law in the state of California.
Thank you, Professor Micheli. So it sounds to me like these courses could be helpful even if you're in a field, let's say like healthcare or education, but you're providing a broad framework for how to navigate this world of statutes that you're talking about. Do I have that right?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, Professor Harder, I would say that there's another course. I don't teach it, but it's part of the government law and policy, which is on the administrative state. And when you mentioned healthcare, again, so many statutes affect the healthcare world, and whether it's an insurer like an HMO or a business, they're all regulated by federal and state statutes, plus rulemaking bodies at the federal and state levels. For example, in my office downtown, just 3 blocks from the Capitol, the opposite way, a block and a half away, is the Department of Healthcare Services. And further down is the Department of Managed Health Care. So understanding the administrative state and the roles of state and federal administrative agencies is another wonderful course that MSL students can take as part of that Master's in Government Law and Policy. And just as we have many statutes at the state and federal levels that the legislative branch brings us, so too do we have many federal and state regulations brought to us by the administrative agencies within the executive branch, or underneath the governor and the rest of the executive branch.
Thank you for making that point. I think that's really important. These courses have been designed based on the curriculum that our JD students studied. We carefully selected the theory and the knowledge and the practical skills that we thought that the graduate programs would most benefit from. And so all students who enroll in the master's program take Legislatures and Lawmaking with Professors Micheli, and as he noted, his co-faculty member, Professor Gosney, and also take this wonderful course he just talked about, the executive branch in the administrative state. For those students who are continuing in government law and policy, they have the option to take Professor Micheli's second course, which is in lobbying and politics, which I know Professor Micheli is very close to what you do on a regular basis. Can you tell us a little bit about that course?
Sure. After 2 decades plus as a lobbyist here in the state of California, we designed this course for the MSL students in particular, and those pursuing the master's in government law and policy, to expose them to the political aspects of lawmaking, and specifically the role of a lobbyist, whether you're at the local, state, or federal levels. The skills that we teach in the lobbying and politics course are applicable across the board. We even get into, if you're in the private sector, about the business of lobbying, whether it's opening and running a successful firm, and getting clients, to everything from dealing with elected officials and their staff, how to handle yourself in providing public testimony at a city council hearing, a state or congressional legislative committee hearing, etc. We try to tackle all of those types of things to give practical experiences and understand the role of government affairs. Whether you're in the public or private sector, again, as I mentioned with the earlier course, the role of government is very heavy. Whether it's at the beginning stages, for example, of running a business, how you open a business, whether it's a local business license, or to forming a corporation or a limited liability company. All of those are done by the state and federal and local governments. And so to have that sort of familiarity, and then what's the role of politics, be it the political parties or grassroots groups or special interest who weigh in on decision makers. So it's not just the practical skills of lobbying at different levels of government, but it's also understanding what are the influences on those elected and appointed decision makers. It could be a lobbyist, it could be a constituent, it could be their political party, it could be their colleagues on the city council, etc. Again, understanding all of those different roles and influences on elected and appointed officials are the things that we delve into in the lobbying and politics course. Again, all leading to the government law and policy degree, because as we've outlined, we're trying to give MSL students the full breadth, the legislative branch, the executive branch, the different levels of government, and the role that you can play with this graduate degree, this master's program in hand when you finish the coursework. So.
Thank you. That's a wonderful explanation. I really appreciate the blend of theory and practice, and the way in which the courses really support learning educational goals for people in a wide variety of professions with a wide variety of objectives. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today was, obviously there's a lot going on in the world, and we've noted that the COVID crisis is a public health crisis that implicates government at various levels. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how these courses might, just by way of example, prepare somebody to navigate a specific issue like the COVID crisis. Do you anticipate the role of lobbyists to change? Do you think that your courses prepare students for navigating changes that may occur because of COVID? If you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Well, this is a fluid and changing. I'll be one of the first to admit that when the California legislature passed a $1 billion check, for lack of a better word, to give authority to Governor Newsom to spend money, state monies, as a part of the response of the state with the pandemic, and then they shut down that night on March the 16th, I thought, oh, they'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks, not realizing that it would not be until the middle of or the beginning of May that they came back. And then they've had to take another extended summer recess, and now they return this coming Monday to finish out their legislative session. So you can see the practical effect of the pandemic in the state. We have had, unfortunately, two assembly members, one who was briefly hospitalized, the other who she and her daughter have not shown any symptoms, knock on wood. But a number of staff who work in the Capitol and in legislative district offices have been diagnosed with COVID-19. So it's really affected everybody. You know, I think there are probably very few of us who don't know somebody who at least knows somebody who's been afflicted in one way or the other. So certainly it's impacted lawmaking, and generally the legislature introduces about 2,300 bills per year. And they've had, which they did this year, just over 2,200 in fact, and they knocked them down to fewer than 800 bills that they have been working on and will through the end of August as part of the 2020 legislative session. For lobbyists themselves, we've certainly had to change. You know, most of our work is in person. For example, our meetings are generally at the Capitol in the legislator's office with the legislator, him or her, or their staff. Our testimony before legislative committees on a regular basis is in person at the hearing room. So how has that changed? Well, now our meetings are not in person, they're by Zoom, or at least by telephone call. And committee testimony, they have strongly discouraged lobbyists and members of the public from coming to the state capitol, and very few do. So most of it is done by telephone, and they've had to adjust and modify their procedures to allow people to telephone in. And of course, those folks don't see each other; they just hear themselves on the telephone. But so we've all had to make adjustments to this new system. But I think that the skills that the students, will get from all of these different courses will give you the skill set, whether it's advocacy skills, both written and oral, or an understanding of the legislative and administrative procedures in the executive branch of government to navigate when you have, hopefully never again in the future, a pandemic like this. But we obviously do have other emergencies at the local, state, and federal levels, and whether you work in California or across the US. Last semester, in the spring semester, Professor Gosney and I had students in 3 different countries, including France. And so you can apply these skills across the board, again, as I've mentioned previously, at different levels of government and in whatever role that you may take. And so I think what you're learning is understanding the process and building the skills so that you can adapt to any hurdles or things that are thrown in front of you in your professional work with this master's degree in government law and policy.
Thank you for those insights, Professor Micheli. I think that's really helpful to think about how we use these skills to navigate current events. And I'm sure that when we get to the questions at the end of the program, if the attendees have questions about any of those issues, we'll invite them to ask you at that time.
Of course.
I wanted to briefly talk about the nature of the courses. As you see here, our courses include a number of different features that are designed to facilitate regular and substantial interaction between faculty and students, and between students and students. So this is one of the primary goals of the program. All of our material is asynchronous in nature, meaning you don't have to be in the same place at the same time. We use asynchronous lectures, and Professor Micheli, in fact, does these wonderful podcasts. We have interactive weekly discussion, ungraded quizzes and chats that are structured to facilitate learning, and then we blend that theory with practical real world assignments. And I'm happy, and I know Professor Micheli will be happy to talk about what goes on in the courses during the question and answer period. But now I want to go ahead and talk about an overview of the program courses. So if you look at the Government Law and Policy Master's degree, the way that it works is a 26-unit degree. We have a slate of required courses that students take in the first year. In your first semester, you are given the opportunity to learn a foundation in legal skills and legal analysis in 2 courses, Introduction to Legal Analysis and a course in analytical skills that's applied to a substantive subject matter area, in this case, contracts. In the second semester, you take courses with Professor Micheli and Professor Gosney in Legislatures and Lawmaking, and then that wonderful executive branch and administrative state course on navigating agencies and regulations that Professor Micheli talked about. In the summer after your first year, you take a couple of 1-unit skills courses on a short timeline. Those are leadership in organizations, which help people navigate leadership within public agency organizations and also in private organizations, especially as they interact with public agencies. And then a skills course in persuasive public speaking, which teaches students not only skills about appearing and testifying in front of people, but also how to persuade people in meetings, for example, one-on-one. We also have our government law and policy students take a course in government law and policy making, which is an advanced iteration of the skills and knowledge they learn in legislatures and lawmaking and the executive branch in the administrative state. Then later in your second year, you have the opportunity to take electives in negotiations, Professor Micheli's course in lobbying and politics, election law. And then we have opportunities for students to work directly with faculty on individual research projects in our directed research and master's thesis programs, which can focus on something that is directly relevant to what the student is working on in their professional life or would like to work on, and or can aim at publication with the master's thesis. And all of our courses are open for electives. So if we have a government law and policy student who's interested in environment, you can take a course in water resources law, which I myself teach, courses in environmental law or international water resources law. So that's an overview of our program. We're continuing to build out courses over time. So we hope to be adding to this catalog over time. So at this point, I am going to hand the microphone over to our admissions counselor, Kat, so she can cover some logistical information about the admission process, and then we'll have an opportunity for question and answer.
Hi, thank you, Professor Harder. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. And just real quick, thank you to Professor Harder and Professor Micheli for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. So just a few logistical things about the application. So application for the fall, this coming fall, is open. You can find the application online at our website. For those of you who have attended the webinar, if you just send an email to graduatelaw@pacific.edu, I will be happy to provide an application fee waiver so that you won't have to pay the fee. There is no GRE or LSAT required. Our requirement is a bachelor's degree, and then there's various requirements on the application like personal statement, letters of reference, things like that. You'll notice some deadlines down below. Our application deadline for the fall is August 3rd of this year. Orientation begins August 10th. It's a fully online orientation. It's just something to get you familiar with the online learning system we use, which is Canvas. And then classes will begin on August 17th. Okay, so move to the next. This is our contact information. Feel free to contact us. Either email or phone number or phone call is fine, whatever you prefer, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have if you don't want to ask them today or if they come up later. With that, I will open it up for questions. So you can either ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat, whichever you prefer.
And while we're waiting to see if people have questions, this is Professor Harder. I wanted to mention if anybody is interested in following up with me directly, I very much encourage you to do so. My email is jharder, H-A-R-D as in dog, E-R, @pacific.edu. And do feel free to reach out to me if I can answer any questions. I've had a substantial role in designing the courses, so I can talk about how the courses operate if you're interested in that. So we have one question, Kat, which asks, will this presentation be available for review at a later time?
Yes, we do record the presentation and I usually send it out the following day. So you'll get this for your records, and then you'll also have our email address right away if you have questions about it.
And Kat, I have a second question, which is how do students access their professors? How can students interact with their professors during this online course? So I am going to ask Professor Micheli to talk about how he interacts with his students in his course, and I will follow up with any additional thoughts.
Well, we have, yes, in several ways. We have office hours, if you will, virtual ones, naturally. And then we're available, and I say we because Professor Gosney and I co-do the Legislatures course. We are always available to students by telephone and by email, both of which we provide the students so they can reach out at their own time individually. We do have chat capability as part of the Canvas website that's utilized. We have weekly discussions and discussion posts. And Professor Harder mentioned earlier about not just interaction with your instructors, but also interactions with your colleagues. For example, our discussion posts where each week we ask students based upon their readings for that week and our podcasts and other materials that we provide to the students, that they address a question and that they respond to at least one or two of their colleagues' posts so that there's interaction, and of course the professors post as well. And so you can actually see, for example, Jane saying to Joe, oh, that's a very interesting point that you made in your analysis. Or somebody else says, well, I disagree with, that answer, and here's why I think this is the correct answer, for example. And then, as I say, so not only do you get that student-to-student interaction, but then Professors Gosney and I participate in those chats and those discussions, and we give our take and insights, and certainly if students post particular questions or concerns, we respond to those as well. So
thank you. That's very helpful. Can people hear feedback or okay? That's very helpful, and I want to underscore the value of discussion. I think that's really important. In my classes, that's where I interact with students on a weekly basis, and they interact with each other, just as Professor Micheli said. And of course, I know Professor Micheli and Professor Gosney prioritize the feedback on student assignments, and so you're getting regular feedback as well. And we all meet with students one-on-one, whether it's individual office hours or by phone or email on a regular basis. So there's actually quite a bit of interaction, and the students really enjoy that aspect of the courses. We have a couple of additional questions that I will note here. One is there a degree that's been more successful in the program over others? So today we are talking about the one degree, which is the Master's of Science in Law, or MSL degree, that has 2 concentrations. And I don't know that we have the objective data at hand to quote statistics, but in my experience, I've been teaching MSL students for a number of years. And all of the MSL students that I have taught thus far have found the degree to be valuable in their careers, whether that's helping them hone a skill or an area of knowledge that they really want to focus on in their careers. For example, a lobbyist who really wanted to learn about water resources law so that she could be active in that area, or whether it's to use the degree in order to apply for more advanced positions or to achieve promotion. The second question, I'm sorry, go ahead, Professor Micheli.
No, I apologize. You had a second point. Please proceed. Sorry.
It's actually a second question, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about success in the program.
Yeah, I was just going to say, my apologies for interrupting you, that a number of colleagues in the lobbying field, as well as employees or staffers, excuse me, at the California State Capitol in the past few years are graduates of the MSL program. And each one of them had the same message, essentially. I pursued it because I didn't think that a law degree was necessary and I didn't want to practice law, but I wanted the training, especially the skills training, the analytical, the advocacy skills, and the degree has helped me immensely. Now, naturally, I only have exposure to the government law and policy MSL graduates, as opposed to, for example, Professor Harder, who's taught water law for a long time. But certainly in the government law and policy, hands down, every MSL graduate has said that it has helped their career, it has helped promote them, but more than anything, it has given them greater confidence in their work and their ability because of having that master's degree, but again, because of the skills that they have developed. And many of them have also said that it's also helped expand their network, their professional network. They met new people in the program that they didn't know before, for example, and just trading information. And now they have contacts in other states, for example, and at different levels of government. And as you can imagine, being a lobbyist, that network, not just where you work, say, for example, the California State Capitol, but perhaps in other state capitals or even at the federal level, is very helpful to expand that network. So many students also talked about the networking opportunities that occurred in their MSL program.
Thank you, Professor Micheli. I'm so glad you brought that up. I have heard similar things from my students, and I just think that's a wonderful aspect of the program. We've got several other questions here I'd like to address. One clarification, somebody asked, is there an undergraduate degree that's been more successful? And my answer to that is no, that the students who enter the program come from a variety of disciplines in their undergraduate degrees, and any particular degree can be successful. We see that in the JD program as well. It is equally true in the MSL program. We have a question that asks, when did the MSL program begin? We've been teaching graduate students on the McGeorge campus since 2001. We have been teaching the MSL program specifically for 8 years, since about 2013. And the online program itself, this just launched in, we accepted our first students starting a year ago. Kat, correct me if I've got this timing wrong, and then they have gone through their first year classes and are starting on their second year. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct. Our first group started in fall of 2019, and they are now in their second and, for the most part, their final year if they kept on the schedule. So
wonderful. And then another question asks, is there only one start in the fall, or do you also have spring admissions, and when is that date?
Yes, so we do have a fall and spring start. The spring start, our application usually opens up around end of August, early September. And then that semester will begin in January.
Wonderful, thank you. And I know that information is available at our on our website, which we provide links to in our follow-up communications. The The final question I have here is, can you clarify if a thesis is required for the program, or is there a capstone or exit interview option available upon graduation? The answer is that we do not require a thesis for the program, but we do offer the opportunity to produce a thesis if that is your goal. So our goal in the program is to match your learning and professional objectives, to tailor your program so that it matches your objectives. So for those who would really benefit from using a thesis opportunity or an individual project with a professor as a capstone, we set that up for you. And we have a number of professors who are willing to work with you depending on what subject matter that you want to focus on, what skill you want, what you think you need. And those can be between 2 units and up to 6 units in the program. So we do tailor those courses. And that, I think, answers that question.
We do have one more question that popped up on the Q&A. How many students are in the program? So I'll take that one. Right now, since we just started in fall of 2019, we had a fall and a spring start. I think there were a total of 10 to 12 students maybe. It's pretty small, but it was just starting. So yeah, but you're looking at a pretty decent size first year course. Yes.
In our Legislatures and Lawmaking course, we had 15 students.
Yes. So you will also be taking, even though the online courses are for MSL, we often have our MSL residential students who take the first year courses and some of the other online courses. In addition, some Masters of Laws, the LLM will take courses with you guys. So you actually get to take courses with a variety of other students, which does bring the total amount of students in the class up to anywhere from 15 to 20.
And here, this is Professor Harder. I just want to jump in and underscore the value of working with this cohort of MSL that you come in with, but also getting to mix with some of the other students via the online space and the McGeorge campus. I teach classes that have public policy students, JD students, Master of Law students, and MSL students, and it's a wonderful interdisciplinary conversation and interaction that I think benefits everybody. And as Kat says, the program started, there's a benefit to these small class sizes, I think, in the online program. We do cap the class sizes at 25 for most classes, smaller for skills courses. So if the program were to grow where you had more than 25 students, we would open a new section. That's how the program is structured. So you would always have the opportunity to work with fairly individual focus with the faculty member teaching the course. So I think that's all of our questions.
We've got one more.
One more,
Sorry,
yay, no, I love the questions.
So the question is, what are financing options for payment of the program? So the program is eligible for federal financial aid. So when you apply for our program, we do encourage you to fill out a FAFSA. And then in addition, there is a small amount of scholarship available. I think it's up to $6,000. I might be a little off on that, but and it's available to highly qualified candidates, and it's made upon reviewing your application. So they would look at your resume, your transcripts, personal statement, and then our dean makes the decision at that time. So you would know upon admission if you received a scholarship. Okay, I'm going to give you guys one more quick minute to ask any questions. And then, like I said, I'll be sending this out probably sometime tomorrow. And you can feel free to contact me. I'll also put Professor Harder's email in there if you have any questions for her or Professor Micheli. Okay, that looks like that's it. So thank you again, Professor Harder and Professor Micheli, for joining us today. And
thank you so much.
Thank all of you for joining us. And I will follow up with you guys tomorrow. Thanks and have a good day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.